Okay, well, welcome back. We have talked about a lot of the major features of the solar system. We have talked extensively about the sun and the structure of the sun. We have talked about the different planets, the inner planets and the outer planets. And so now it is time for us to talk about the rest of the stuff that is out there, those smaller objects in the solar system. So let's get to it. Uh, those smaller objects are classified based on their shape, their size, what they're made up of, and also how they orbit around the sun or around other planets. The major categories include the dwarf planets, comets, asteroids, and meteoroids. So let's first talk about where we can find these things. Few key areas where we can find those different smaller objects of the solar system. First one being the asteroid belt. That is the area between Mars and Jupiter where we can find the asteroids. Another area is the Kuiper belt, which extends just beyond Neptune's orbit. That is where we can find many of the dwarf planets. And then beyond the Kuiper belt, we have the Oort cloud, and that is where we can find many of the comets. Okay, so let's first talk about those dwarf planets. We've all cried a tear for Pluto. I know you have, because he does not meet the criteria of what a planet is any longer. And so what do those dwarf planets now have in common? Those dwarf planets do have enough gravity that they can pull themselves into a spherical shape, but they have other objects that are blocking their orbits in one way or another. We can find those dwarf planets in the Kuiper belt, except for Ceres. Ceres is actually part of the asteroid belt. Now, those dwarf planets that orbit beyond Neptune are also called Plutoids. So there's a little nod to Pluto. Don't have to feel sorry for him anymore. And most of those Plutoids do orbit the sun. Okay, so moving on to our comets. Comets are basically big, dirty snowballs. They are ice and dust. And they form in those very far, far regions of the solar system, the Oort cloud. The comet has what is called a head, and that head has a couple of different parts to it. Now, when it comes close to the sun, of course, the energy from the sun causes that big, chunky ball of ice to release gas and dust. It's melting a little bit. And so where the comet has that core, that inner core called the nucleus, sort of that fuzzy area that forms around it is called the coma. Now, as that comet approaches the sun, and it does heat up and it does start to glow, and we have that dust and that gas coming off of it, it does form a tail. It actually has two tails. One is called the gas tail and one is called the dust tail. Now, how can you tell the difference between them? The gas tail points away from the sun, and I'm going to explain in a minute why, where the dust tail points along the path of the comet. Okay, now those comets have very, very elliptical orbits, as you can see in the picture here. Most of the planets, although they're not perfect circles, are pretty close to being circular orbits around the sun. But as you can see here, these comets have extremely flattened elliptical orbits. So now, as those comets approach the sun, again, they begin to melt, and that dust and gas is released from the comet. Now, and we create those tails. Now, the ion tail points away from the sun because it's being blown away by that solar wind. So we have that interaction between the solar wind and the ions in that ion tail, where the dust tail simply follows the comet's orbit around the sun because it is that dust, and so it's not affected by the solar wind in quite the same way as the ions are. All right, moving right along, let's talk asteroids. There are hundreds of thousands of asteroids in that asteroid belt. They are very rocky objects, too small to be considered dwarf planets, and they don't have that same gravity that has allowed them to become sort of those spherical objects. They orbit the sun in the asteroid belt. but some of them do have more elliptical orbits that bring them closer to the sun. Um, there are possibilities that asteroids can hit Earth. Of course, it is believed that one did about 65 million years ago, which is what ended up killing the dinosaurs. Um, Now, the different types of asteroids. The composition depends on where they are located in that asteroid belt. In the outermost region, they have a dark reddish brown to black surface, very rich in organic material. Um, if they are dark gray, they are very rich in carbon. In the innermost region, they are light gray and they have that stony or metallic composition. So even within that asteroid belt, there are differences in the asteroids. Okay, so where were we? Again, those innermost region, they are that light gray and have that stony metallic composition. So again, even within our asteroid belt, depending on where in the asteroid belt they're located, they can have different characteristics. Okay, meteoroids. We're almost there. A meteoroid is just a small rocky body that revolves around the sun. What's the difference between that and an asteroid? Just the size of it. Now, a meteoroid that falls into Earth's atmosphere and actually strikes the ground, so it's got a hit, that's when it becomes a meteorite. Now, while it's falling and it's causing that bright streak in the sky, that is when it is a meteor. So same object, three names, all about the position of where that object is located. Of course, you can see meteors almost any night. If you are far enough away from the city to avoid any glare of light. So we should be able to see them here in Brevard. At certain times of the year, of course, we can see more, and those are called meteor showers, but that's typically when Earth is passing through an area where there is a lot of debris from comets. And that is it for our smaller objects in the solar system. Do not forget, please, that your notes need to be in Cornell style, and don't forget your entrance ticket. Thank you much. See you later.